Alright guys, TacticalRab back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Welcome back to VALORANT news and many big updates today. On the partnership side, we're going to dive into some fresh Scrimbux as well, indicating NRG could now be the new team to beat going into the LCQ, but also OpTic revealing that European practice is just so far ahead of NA practice that might be one of the key reasons why they're going to boot camp in Poland ahead of the World Championship. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. It really helps out the channel. Thanks very much indeed for doing that one. Thanks also for 22,000 subs. Pretty sure we were yesterday. Well on the road to 25k and beyond. Hit the red button if you haven't already and you want to do so. Not going to force you, just going to suggest. First of all, Stewie 2k, after, well, a legendary career in Counter-Strike, is actually going to make the transition, as we kind of expected for quite some time, over here to Valorant. Well, okay, he's going to stream a little bit more. We know that the recent drama with Wardell, and they were talking in DMs, and they were saying that, okay, like everyone in Valorant is brain dead or something, was what Wardell was saying. And therefore, like, Wardell was effectively saying, Stewie, look, don't be a pro, just come here and do content, and maybe if you want to be a pro at some point, you can do that. Because I imagine maybe Stewie's looking at Shroud and thinking, well, hang on a second here, Shroud was like a content creator for quite some time, like obviously a legendary NA CS player as well from back in the day, and now Stewie's thinking, well, hang on a second, and Shroud's come back and playing pro for Sentinels, like, maybe I can do a similar thing. So Stewie 2k confirms yesterday he's going to be working for Evil Geniuses still, streaming Val and CS, right? So stepping away from competitive CS, probably about time to be perfectly honest, focusing on streaming, thanks to those who tagged along, all this type of stuff. So end of an era, I suppose, for Stewie, but I mean, yeah, next steps are going to be, he actually mentions Val first, right? So maybe an indication of what could be to come. Could he do a Shroud in the future? Certainly, if he wants to compete in Pro Valorant, like, I'd imagine that some teams in franchising might give him a spot next year if Shroud does well, for example, here on Sentinels, as he may well do. Speaking of players being content creators, wanted to mention this from Shanks, because he's officially now FaZe Shanks. We did, of course, see that, well, Shanks was kind of joining FaZe potentially. I think he was like their substitute player really on their FaZe Valorant roster, because, I mean, yeah, they were going to bring him along. The team didn't really want to drop him, but he was kind of just going to be there as the content guy. Now he's officially here as the content guy as well. So that's pretty cool from FaZe and Shanks as well. For some reason, I've got this tweet up twice. We've already seen it once. Let's talk about the partnership side then. So firstly, Ghost Gaming, another of these teams that, I mean, Ghost, honestly, it's kind of crazy what happened to them, because they were looking so promising, this team of 5 going into stage 2. They dominated the majority of their games in the stage 2 qualifiers. They go to the playoffs, right? The main event playoffs for stage 2, needing to win just one series to knock Sentinels out of the LCQ. They get double first rounded, Ghost Gaming. Sentinels get the spot still and Ghost fall out despite having such a good team of great players. Now they failed to advance to the next step of the partnership process. That makes sense. Obviously, we didn't really expect Ghost to get it regardless of what they did. But what this does mean more than likely is that their team of, 5 players with some talented guys on there could well be options for other partnership teams that get a spot that want an upgrade. Ghost for now apparently are going to stick around for a little bit to see what happens with the domestic leagues, what happens in the tier 2 scene. But yeah, Ghost Gaming, as probably expected, really not going to be a part of the partnership ecosystem next year. But again, another organization that they've got players, great players sitting on their roster that aren't going to be, as it stands, in the partnership league, which definitely opens the door to, guys like Nismo or something to get picked up by another team and create further rostermania questions as we move forward after the World Championship especially. This also to mention on TSM, just because many orgs lately, TSM, 100 Thieves, 2 key examples, seem to be doing a fair bit of cost cutting over the last few weeks. Both organizations released an awful lot of players on their kind of creative sides, social media and the like, and apparently, as Richard Lewis pointed out last night, they're looking to streamline their esports division, i.e. cut costs in certain ways, even considering selling their LCS spots. I think their plan was maybe to like sell their NA spot and go to like the European spot or whatever. Not exactly familiar with this story particularly, but thought it was interesting to look at regardless, just because TSM right now, you'd imagine, given they're pretty good friends with Riot, would be considered for this partnership spot next season, would make a fair bit of sense. Now, if TSM all of a sudden are thinking about selling their League of Legends spot, does that create any friction there with potentially TSM getting in to Valorant franchising? Or is it Riot looking at TSM's books and saying, we'd kind of like you to cut the cost on this side a little bit if we actually want to be confident that you'd be a good partner for the next several years in Valorant. So it's always an interesting one to look at here. Not sure it's going to affect their chances of being a franchise or partnership team for Valorant, but I'm interested to look at as well if TSM are planning to cut costs as much as seemingly they are. Just to mention this, if you guys are kind of unfamiliar with the rest of the situation, we've got the likes of version 1, the Guards, like I'm also Sentinels, xNed, they also made it to the next stage of partnership application talks. Gen.G also made it as well, but Gen.G are actually going to be releasing their team, or at least allowing their team to search for options, because JC Stan Stani says he was very briefly on 100 Thieves, right? But he says here, looking for team, Gen.G allowing the roster to look for other opportunities, willing to play in any region, just want to play with the best, right? So I thought JC Stani did a great job very briefly these last several months. And if Gen.G do get a spot somewhere, then maybe JC Stani still goes on. But I think it's nice what Gen.G are doing, saying, look, guys, we don't know if we're going to get a partnership spot next season. You guys are free to explore offers. And then, you know, maybe if we do get a partnership spot, we can stay or whatever we want to do. But thought it was interesting because JC Stani definitely a player of note from that side of things. Another big change happening last night from Jovi, who I believe was briefly on 100 Thieves, right? You can actually see it in his AVI. And then he joined OpTic shortly before, was it stage 2 or a couple of months ago? Maybe he was actually joining them right before their victory at Masters Reykjavik. But whenever Jovi joined the team, he was there for quite some time as effectively like an assistant, coach, analyst type guy to the OpTic team. Now he's been released from OpTic yesterday, which in kind of a weird circumstance actually, no longer with OpTic, available for LCQ and champs anywhere. DM's open, he says. So Wardell says, let's make a team. He says, let's win a chip. But also from the coach of OpTic, right, Chet, says, good luck moving forward. Appreciate you more than you know. So kind of surprising, really, because if you'd have thought that Jovi maybe didn't get on with the coaching stuff, or the team didn't like him, or there was some weird dynamic or whatever, like you'd have thought in that case, then Chet wouldn't be coming in the replies, and then Jovi wouldn't be saying, you know, appreciate you, Chet, you know, for all you did, all this type of stuff. You thought there might have been a bit of friction there. So maybe it's the fact that the team in general, like the organization, didn't really feel like they could support it in terms of funding. Maybe that's a common thread across a lot of these teams right now, or there is some friction that we can't really see. But this guy's definitely got a lot of credit for what he's done on the last 2 teams he's been on. So kind of surprising that he's departing from OpTic in exactly this manner. Definitely intrigued to your thoughts on that one in the comment section below. Let's talk about OpTic in more detail though, because Ye had a few words to say the other day on the practice situation in North America. We kind of can see the last few months really that no team from NA has been able to compete on an international level quite the way that OpTic have. And they're saying that a lot of that is to do with the fact that the practice in North America is nowhere near as good. We hear this as a similar trend over time. The players will quite often say, okay, these guys aren't really trying, they're throwing in scrims, not giving their 100%, not really trying actually to play their best Valorant gameplay in scrims, and therefore the practice is often way better in other regions. Now, Ye actually says this is absolutely true in a clip from a couple of days ago, saying the teams that they practiced against while they were in Europe for Masters Copenhagen were just infinitely better than NA practice. Even for like relatively small European teams in the regional leagues, they had some really interesting and kind of innovative executes that OpTic got some great practice against that they simply cannot get from these North American teams.
I will say though, I think the practice in EU is infinitely better than the practice you get in NA, unfortunately. I don't know, like there are some really good like tier 2 like EU teams, like kind of like best in their region or best in their country, and they slap. They have like some insane execs. I would say just the practice in general. Like,
so admittedly, it is a common trend, not just in Valorant, but also in esports in general, that yes, North American practice is not deemed to be particularly good. And yeah, we kind of see that here with OpTic saying that actually they're going to bootcamp in Poland briefly before, I think like 2 weeks before Champions in Istanbul, Turkey. They're going to go to Poland and bootcamp briefly, maybe against some of the teams they just mentioned, right? So they have very limited faith. And in fairness, right, in North America, if they were to stay in North America, at that point, there'd only be very few teams to actually practice against anyway, right? Because at that point, there's only cNed and there's only one team from the LCQ that actually are going to be going to champs anyway from North America. So it makes sense for them to go to Europe anyway, just so they can actually play against more teams that are there and are going to probably be in a similar region going into champions that are still going to be playing. Because in North America, you'd imagine most of the teams are at that point either just splitting up or certainly not playing Valorant on a regular basis going into champions. So probably an intelligent decision regardless, but definitely does add fuel to the fire of the idea that yes, NA practice, the teams don't really try their best, give it their all, like, work on things 100% as they might do compared to some other regions, right? And we kind of see that in terms of the results, I suppose, of this region recently, because we can see OpTic Gaming, right? They've dominated this region for quite some time now, especially on the international stage, winning Masters 1 in Reykjavik, 3rd place most recently, of course, at Copenhagen. And every other team, xNed and the Guard, for example, the 2 teams that have kind of gone with OpTic to these tournaments, have both bombed out of the tournament, right? xNed and the Guard both were the #1 seed. They both lost both of their games, right, to bomb straight out of that tournament. And you do have to wonder, really, looking at some of these teams recently and their international performances. Of course, many of these teams don't even get to that stage, but like when they have done, OpTic are really the only team that's consistently performed at that kind of level compared to the other teams. So maybe a change of culture, change in mentality and mindset needed that some of these other teams might get if they were to go to Europe and see the way some of those teams practice, if North America kind of wants to establish itself as a more dominant region outside of just having one team that can compete every single event. Sentinels, of course, there's always discussion here about, okay, of these guys practicing and they go for content and stuff like this. Of course, like, they're doing content, they're currently practicing as well. Can they win the LCQ? Of course, a very big question, but there might be another favorite kind of throwing their hat into the ring of favorites here for the LCQ. We've talked the last few days about the fact that FaZe Clan apparently and Cloud9 are considered to certainly be up there. 100 Thieves might be there or thereabouts, but NRG apparently, based on their recent scrims, as Leaf says here from, of course, Cloud9, I'll come clean and drop the biggest Scrimbux ever. NRG is winning LCQ and champion. So the other day, we saw version 1 saying that it was FaZe that were the dominant team, and they were going to wipe the floor with everyone at the LCQ. Now we've got Leaf from Cloud9 saying that NRG are the team that's going to be destroying everyone. So look, maybe those are two teams that you might put in the favourites bucket. Even as Vanity says, though, the last 4 international event winners, a majority Vandal users. This is also a rather interesting point that was noticed, especially at Copenhagen, that most teams now seem to be using the Vandal as opposed to the Phantom. The Vandal was way more heavily picked here than the Phantom for the first time in quite some time, which might well show that that debate has finally been settled, but Vanity and Cloud9 do not yet seem convinced. But very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy it, hit on the like button. Tells the YouTube god does a good video. Others like you should see it as well. And I grow the competitive Valorant community. Thank you guys as always. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.
Yo.
Hey, been thinking about it. If we got Zelsis a new mic, our comms would probably improve a lot.
Honestly, I don't think it's gonna change anything. I think he just sounds like that.